Hello, I'm Christine Blackhurst. I'm the gallery director at Texas A&M University Commerce. On behalf of the University Gallery and the Department of Art, I welcome you to this artist visit in conjunction with the group invitational exhibition, Wax Applications, showcasing the depth and breadth of encaustic and cold wax mediums. Guest curated by Jane Cornish-Smith. Today, I'm honored to introduce to you artist Elise Wagner, whose work is included in this exhibition. Elise is a painter, printmaker, educator, and innovator. An East Coast transplant, she based herself in Portland, Oregon since 1986. She earned her painting degree with a focus on science from Portland State University, fusing geology, nature's indifference, alchemy, climate science, physics, astronomy, and cartography into her art. Science and abstract art are defined as mystery, and Elise continually negotiates this in her work. The encaustic medium, a mixture of beeswax, resin, and pigment, lends itself well into Elise's studio practice and creative aspirations, resulting in artwork rich in depth that is visually, emotionally, and intellectually compelling. Working with encaustic since the early 1990s, she has developed methods for creating with wax, printing from the texture of her paintings, and merging encaustic painting with collograph and intaglio printmaking. Elise is a recipient of numerous grants and awards, including the Pollock-Krasner Foundation grant. She has been included in significant group and solo exhibitions and shows her work at galleries in Washington, D.C., Houston, Palm Springs, Astoria, Oregon, and Seattle. Her work is included in corporate and private collections throughout the U.S. As an educator, Elise has been invited to teach and present encaustic painting and printmaking internationally and domestically. Elise currently teaches virtual workshops and does private one-on-one mentoring in her studio. I'd like to welcome Elise and Jane.
Well, hi, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's a great introduction, and we're so happy to have Elise. And we're so excited to get a glimpse into your studio, which you are sitting in right now, and to learn about your amazing encaustic practice. And I know a lot of people who are new to the medium or even new to painting, and veterans alike will really find it to be fascinating and informative. So hear a few of your comments, and we can take a look into your studio.
This is my long commute from my home to my studio. Here we are. Head in. Real quick tour. Turbo tour. I've had to be very neat in this studio because it is small. This is my desktop that has pretty much a history and postcards of all my shows over the years. This is my wax central area. This is where all of my waxes melt down. And then here I work on my small works. So I'm working on a series of small works. These are what I put on my online shop. And so I have been working on those right here. And these are some of my new works that'll be on my website soon. I've done them over the past year. This one is based on satellite imagery that I love. And then I'm really into planetary geology, and that one is based on the surface of what the moon of Saturn, Europa, looks like. And then this one is based on the wildfires that we had here in Oregon. And then this one is based on Venice and the flood that was there. And then I'm also working on this grid piece, series of 20 14 by 11s. They're all different textured and very inspired by the Perseverance mission of Mars. And this is Wilhelmina. She's learning to be a studio dog. And then this is my oil paint area. So everything's divided by wax over there, oil here, oil paints, oil sticks, oils, tools, proper lighting for working on very detailed things like that. So this is my little work table, and I do a little filming here. This was my painting stand when I was in college, and And those, I remember the pieces I made with those crazy marks right there. There's kind of a divide between the middle of the studio, the painting area, and then the printing area. So the press is over here, and I prepare my paper here. Then this is where I ink my plates, get them ready for the press, which is here. And these are my plates, sketchbooks, and then these are the inks, Kua inks that I work with when I'm inking the plates. This space also doubles as my teaching area on Zoom. So I put my laptop here and then I zoom away and I either teach encaustic painting or printmaking. Yes, this is my studio.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great studio, and so organized and categorized really well, which I guess that really helps with your process.
It's an oversized garage that came with my house when I bought it. And so I had to condense it down from 1,000 square foot warehouse studio into 400 square feet. So
that's a condensing.
It was necessary. Yeah, no lawnmowers, no cars, nothing in the studio that represents anything other than being creative. I think that's the key to kind of setting up a practice for yourself as an artist,
right?
In general.
Is there a certain time of day that you find optimal for making your work?
I try to get out here in the morning. And then most of the time it's I'm kind of getting into the rhythm of my dog's napping times, which is usually between like 11 and 3. And then in the evenings too, sometimes I'll paint.
Yeah, I think everyone has their own kind of MO, but I think the important thing is just to get in there and start making.
Yeah, just even if it's just looking, it's something.
Right. Or organizing or whatever. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
Okay, I think you have a video now you can share on some of the basics of encaustic medium, which is an ancient medium that's been around for thousands of years, and
yes.
And then you also have a video on the making of traces and transits 1 and 2, which is really cool because it's in the exhibition that we're doing. So
yeah.
Love to see what your process and how it all comes together.
So encaustic, I came to encaustic because I was seeking transparency and creating more depth in my work. And so it's applied here to a panel. I put a little bit of turquoise pigment in the wax medium, which is comprised of the beeswax and the resin. And then I put the pigment in it and then painting it on with a brush and then fusing it here with a blowtorch. And that kind of sets it up for blending, and it's important to do the fusing so that it adheres to the panel, and you have to fuse each layer so that each layer sticks to the other. And in ancient times, they used just an open flame, and the torch is what we have now, in addition to the heat gun and also the iron. I use quite a bit of irons. I use mark making tools. So there's the pigment going into the wax. That's pigment that I got in Verona, Italy at a color factory called Dolce Colori that I got to tour, and I schlepped many of their pigments home with me. Somehow I squeezed them into my suitcase. So you can blend the color, you add color to it, you work with different layers of the medium to separate the colors. And here I'm incising line into the work. I really, one of my very favorite things is line. That's kind of an important principle to me of art and design is line. That's a big one. And I'm incising the color there. And then here I'm drawing with the wax using a batik-like pen, a wax flow pen. And that's made by Encausticos. And it's really wonderful that you can just draw on there. And symbols are a really important part of my work, and looking at the language of different symbols throughout time is something I like to integrate. And then here I'm applying an RNF iridescent oil stick to the top surface of the texture of the painting. So there's a lot you can do with it. This is just one little series of things you can do with Encaustic. It's just an incredible medium that has so much versatility.
Yeah, it really does. And it's so luminous and beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. What would be really cool is to see your process in making traces and transits, which is an encaustic colograph. And maybe you can explain a bit about what a encaustic colograph is, because you're combining painting and printmaking in your practice.
Yeah. So a colograph is basically a collaged plate in printmaking. So it could be anything. It could be a piece of fabric that you put ink on and you run it through a press, an etching press, and then you get an imprint of that fabric or of that embossment of the fabric, or cardboard or any kind of marks that you make. You can take objects and collage them onto a plate and print them. And in this instance, I am formulating my own white wax, and I'm putting that onto the printing plate. And then I am using dry point etching and some of the more common aspects of techniques of printmaking. Here, this dry point etching. So I'll do that first. And then I apply the wax over it in areas, and I pay attention to the negative and positive space. And I usually do a background monotype to get some of the negative space to come through, like the gold in those pieces there. So these are the mounted prints onto panels that are in a collection. And then these are the plates with the residue of the ink on them. So what I did is I reworked the plates, and I only made one print from each of these. And then I had shadow boxes made. And I created a background for the shadow box, which is just a 30 by 30 inch encaustic painting, like right there. And then I separated I superimposed the plate on top, and I created a separation in the shadow box here, so that when you see them in the shadow boxes, there's a real depth to them. And then that is the print mounted onto a panel and under layers of wax that became an encaustic painting. So here's the plate emulating the print with the background painting, and then the paintings themselves, which were on display in my solo exhibition at Chase Young Gallery in Boston in 2013.
Well, and you also get the shadow of effect in there too, because of the separation. That's really cool.
Right, exactly. And there are also two smaller ones that are 12 by 12 that were kind of the mock-ups for this project that I had.
Yeah. Do you always use plexiglass plates as your matrix, or do you use metal and other?
I actually use clayboard panels sometimes too, ampersand clayboard panels, and I'm teaching a class soon using that. So they are pretty thin. So I use my white wax to create collagraphs on either plexiglass, or sometimes I use clayboard. And this is what a clayboard collograph looks like. So you're basically just replacing the collage with wax, and you're making marks. And then I'm using here Akua non-toxic soy and honey-based inks, which is really wonderful because I'm working with beeswax, and I'm also working with inks that are made from honey and soy. And so the background color here is just a monotype, which is one of these. You could get a set of 4. It's really wonderful for my class. I just have my students get a set of 4, and you use one of the blank ones to put the turquoise color on in this instance. And then I went over it with a graphite ink to print it and superimpose it on top of the background. And they call that a double drop print in printmaking. So this can be formally in the center of the paper, all nice and neat, or you can just take a piece of paper that is the same size as the plate and run it through the etching press and then mount it onto a panel, use it in collage materials. It doesn't necessarily have to be this formal printmaking process. It's just a way to kind of further exploit what I got into it for is that I wanted to further exploit the textures that I create with my paintings. So this is an example of a plexiglass plate, and usually I'll use the whole plate. and I'll work with the negative and positive space. But with this, I decided to create a stencil or, mask it off into a circular shape. And this was done right at the very beginning of the quarantine. So and everything was in retrograde. So this is part of my Earth retrograde limited edition series. So with this being a printmaking process, you can indeed make several prints from the same plate. So I made about 8 of these, and then it got crushed down to a point where I had to either go in and redo this, which would create a new edition. Mm-hmm. And I haven't gotten around to it, but the wax does get crushed down in the process after a while. So you could get anywhere from 10 to 20 prints from a plate, depending on how you have the texture built up on it. And then this is the resulting print from this plate.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Such great textures.
It picks up all the intaglio, and I do that by using, again, like a Kua cloth and the different techniques of printmaking, like wiping. So that using tarlatan or a Kua cloth. And then this is an example of a slightly larger plate, and this is about a 1/4 inch thick. And this is where I use the wax like a painting, going corner to corner with the wax, and then working again with those negative spaces a little bit. And I just love the residue that's created on the plates. And I have so many of these, I'm thinking about having a whole show of just the plates because of the residue that's left on them and the beautiful surface that they.
Is that where the slight colorations come from? Is the residue?
Yeah, it's just the what's left from the inks. Now, the inks are non-toxic and super easy cleanup. So you just clean up with soap and water, but it still leaves a little bit of residue on the plate. And then this is one of the prints. There are 9 of these. So I got quite a few out of these. And this is on Encaustic microfiber paper, which is a very absorbent paper, and it just loves being printed on. So I love using it. It's actually my preferred material. And then this is another one in which these linear elements are dry point etching. So the dry point etching is a separate plate from the encaustic colograph that I laid over it.
Wow.
So
that's gorgeous. Yeah. There's so many possibilities, aren't there, with printmaking or with encaustic. Wow. That's so cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. I didn't really realize that you could use all those different substrates or matrices, I guess, for printmaking processes. So it's great to know.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, I think you have a video you can share on the colograph process and using the press and everything. So
yeah, it does require a press. I would buy press time with my friend Jane Paliarulo, who I co-taught with encaustic colograph. And it was really great because we would do the encaustic part at my studio, and then we would go down to her shop and we would do the printmaking part. So the students would have all the time in the world to, produce their plates. And that's what I would do in my process is I would make my plates ahead of time and then put them aside for my printing day. And then go down to Jane's shop, which is literally a mile down the road from me. And I would ink up and get my inks mixed and ready. And in this case, I took a whole day out. This started at 7 a.m. in February of 2013. And she had ordered me the large paper to work with. And I did not leave that studio until 7 p.m. And I had a print assistant as well. So it was quite a project. But that's the tarlatan I was referring to, the wiping. And that's here I'm inking up the background plate for the big print. And then we're removing the paper there from the bath. We had to roll it up because it was so big. And the reason that you have to wet the paper is because the inks dry through absorption. So that's the first run of the monotype background. Then I add another color and to enrich it. And that is a Takich 60 by 48, I think, press there. Quite a behemoth of a machine. Loved working with that press. And so that's the first background. And the collagraphs are ready to ink here. And I went over the relief lines first with a brayer just to show that as an example. But the thing you really want to do is use a brush or something like a spatula to get the color in all of the nooks and crannies and the grooves. So I switched to a brush, and I primarily use stencil brushes to get the ink into all the texture of the wax. And my tarlatans get pretty inked up there. They get pretty dirty. So that's all ready. And now we're setting the paper. Now it's full bleed, so we didn't have to worry about centering the paper. That was nice. And we just set it down there and made sure that it printed well and the pressure was right. And the big reveal, the big surprise. Printmaking is a magical thing. I love this part.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen.
You never know what's going to happen, and it's always in reverse.
Nice.
So the intention for these was to then, so here I'm blotting the ink, and the intention for these prints was to mount them onto panel and continue working on them as paintings for my upcoming show. So this is the second one, and we're going through the process again. She was so nice in helping me. Love her.
Be hard to do by yourself, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So those etched lines, I was really pleased how those came through just by etching directly into the plate with an etching needle.
Beautiful.
And then the example of the print in the plate, and then the plates, and finishing with a little glass of wine and a day's work of making that couple of prints.
Wow, that was great. That's so fascinating to see the process. It's quite a process, isn't it? It's just
it is. At Vermont Studio Center, when I was doing a residency there, they said, "You are definitely a materials girl, aren't you?" And just very, it seems like I create these complicated processes for myself, but I think it's because I love the whole methodicness of making art, the whole process of it, and thinking of different ways to push things in a direction that kind of defines what my expression is. So
yeah, I'll bet when you're done with one work, you're thinking of 10 other ways you can go with your next project. So that's great. Yeah. Well, what drew you to Encaustic as a medium in the first place?
Well, I was exposed to it through a demonstration that I saw in college, and I was at the time making a lot of heavy collaged abstract paintings and working with oils, and I was growing impatient with the drying time of oils, and I really wanted to have more depth and layering in my work. And I saw a demonstration of Encaustic, and then I ran over to the university library, and there was nothing available about this medium. I found a line or two here and there, and luckily I was living in a storefront next door in the building of a glass artist who had all of these recipes and knew a little bit about Encaustic. So I just started teaching myself, and it was mainly because of the translucency of it, the quick drying time, how adhesive it is, how you can put collage materials into it, you can embed things. It just opened up this whole incredible universe of my work, and I've been just enchanted by it ever since, and it's been 25 years.
Oh yeah. So. It's such a beautiful medium. It's just has a mystery to it, I almost think. So.
Yeah, it really does. And then it also ties in with the theme of my work, which is a lot of it is mystery in relation to science, and how abstract art is also a mystery, and kind of bringing those together with an ancient medium that is also mysterious. So I love that duality and all of that combination of things.
Well, speaking of that duality, I think you've got a video you can share on exhibition you did on global warming and the melting glaciers. And it's just kind of interesting how you're using hot wax to do that. And then I think you're going to speak to that a little bit coming up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's called Climate Charts, I think is the name of the.
Yes, it was at Butters Gallery in 2017.
This is kind of exploring the colors of what it is like at the base of a glacier. And I really took some time to get the color exact so that you could kind of almost imagine what it would be like to be at the base of that glacier and maybe even underneath it. I mounted the graphite rubbing onto the warm wax panel. And I wasn't sure what I was going to get, but I was pretty excited that I was repurposing the texture of my painting into another painting. So birthing another body of work from what existed before. So I've been in the habit of making these graphite rubbings. And so these are some of the actual graphite rubbings that you see in these pieces. And this is one that you get a clear example. It ripped a little bit in the process. But you can see how I rubbed it on there. This is on tracing paper. What I'll do is I'll go around to different areas of the paintings where I think I'm going to get a good texture. And I'll go ahead and just give it a little rub dub. And I'll keep them. And sometimes I'll use them. And in this case, I just decided to do a whole series of them. And with this one, I really just wanted to create a topographical feel to it, as if you're descending down into a vast crevasse of ice and water. And I did this through this same method that I've developed with Encaustic, where I trap air in the wax. And I pretty much rely on chance occurrences in the materials, and then that's when the dialogue begins. I'm working fairly blindly in my process, and it's when I put the oil paint on there that it really just pops out. And I use very little oil paint, and I use it very sparingly just to kind of bring out what's already there. I've been following the Larsen C ice shelf, which was basically a 2-mile long crack in the ice, and it was threatening to break off. And then it did in July when I was working on this painting. They were describing it as, a metric trillion ton iceberg, the biggest of its kind, the size of the state of Delaware. It wasn't the shape of it, but I kind of went to that shape for inspiration. So I started looking at the shape of Delaware, and I drew it in my journal, and it kind of looked like Delaware in a very subtle way. An element of, more glacial water kind of moving in to create a little bit of tension. Like I really wanted it to feel like there was tension and that things were getting pushed out. So, okay, this one is called Glacier Stream 2, and it's the last piece of the show. It was the final piece out of 29 pieces that I completed for the show. And it kind of comes full circle from Glacier Stream 1. In that so much information had passed and so much news of climate change had come between all of the different, the many, many hurricanes and storms that we had been encountering and the ice shelf breaking off. This piece was pivotal in that I was really interpreting that, and it was starting to really come out. It was coming into my consciousness and ending up on the painting.
Wow, that's just gorgeous work.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, just beautiful.
Yes, it was kind of funny. I discovered that I was working within a paradox one day when during an ice storm in Portland. I was walking my dog and I just saw
I just saw this puddle with water under it, trapped underneath the ice. And I took a picture of it. And then I went home and I looked at my graphite rubbing. And you can see it on my website. I kind of have them compared in a like a box of images of the actual painting with the graphite rubbing and then the actual puddle picture and how similar they look. They look almost identical. And I started realizing, oh, I am working with a hot molten medium to create melting ice. And it dawned on me that I was on this whole new journey in my work.
Is there any other influences or motivation or inspiration for the work you do?
Yeah, the starting influences were, I was really lucky to grow up where I did, and I had great art teachers in high school. And what I was mostly influenced by in the very beginning was going to see, Van Gogh paintings and Monet paintings. And I was very influenced by Da Vinci and all of these things I was looking at initially. And then when I moved here, the majestic landscape of Oregon and the beautiful skies and clouds that are here, combined with the weather patterns, was something that I was immediately interested in. I was looking at storm patterns and meteorology. And then I started studying geology and learned the fascinating history behind the geology here in Oregon. And I've always incorporated that by trying to emulate it with the texture of my work. So I've been kind of building up these geological surfaces on my work to match the interests and the influences. So I think contemporary times is very much something that influences me as well. What's just going on in the world, and my work kind of develops and evolves alongside the history of discovery in a lot of ways. Right. So before I was doing a lot of work about storm patterns, and that was leading up to, that was the result of climate change. But that was back in the mid 90s when we were just like, oh, it's just what happens. There are storms. Nothing's changed.
Right.
It's different.
And look where we are now.
Yeah. So I just have tapped that, and I've tapped it through looking at the stars, and I'm a real stargazer, and watching astronomy and astrology and energy fields and all of that stuff too, and bringing that in along with some concrete earth sciences like geology, and just making a comment on that and what's going on societally in the world, and how maybe to kind of get into the consciousness, but expressing both beauty and destruction in one thing.
Yeah, that dichotomy again. And it's so important to bring an awareness to it. And you're doing that. You're creating beautiful work, but you're also creating an awareness of what's going on currently and how important it is to perhaps do something about it, or at least be aware. So I guess you studied science in art school way back when, and you've always had that thread running throughout your work since? Yeah,
I have. And what's funny is it's funny to have the question posed as to how my work has evolved, because it's not been a linear process for me. Mm-hmm. I first got into Pacific Northwest College of Art, and then I got into the San Francisco Art Institute, and then I got into the MFA program at NYU. And all of these things made me realize, or really made me consider my situation. So I had to be realistic and practical. And so I decided that because I wanted to learn a lot more, and especially in undergraduate school, that, about the world and about science and things that I wanted to incorporate ultimately, I chose the route of going to a university so that I could get a more well-rounded education and apply these elements into my work. And so and to save myself from enormous debt, I said no to San Francisco Art Institute. I did really enjoy studying with who I got to study with, which was a New York School, Brooklyn-born Cooper Union graduate, Mel Katz. And he was just the best. And I chose to stay in Portland and study with him on the recommendation of my drawing professor who said, you should go study with Mel. You would excel. And so I had just great professors here in college, and I didn't really feel the need to transfer to San Francisco or New York or anything. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, what future projects are on the horizon for you?
Well, we've got this back here. I've got my this series of pieces that's based on the Mars Perseverance mission. And then I just finished these two, which I've entered into various virtual exhibitions that you'll see coming up. And all of these in the background here, the sides have to be painted, and I have to do the finishing work on those. And ultimately, what I'd like to do is present proposals or to museums or universities for a full-scale climate change type related show that would involve all of this work that I've done in isolation. And I've just finished writing 2 major grants to possibly fund my ambitions to do so.
Well, thank you so much, Elise. It was just fascinating to see your processes, your amazing work, and just your dedication to your practice, and how you've developed and innovated with Encaustic as a medium. Thank you so much for allowing us to do a studio visit with you.
Yeah, I appreciate this. It's a great way to get to know everybody and get the word out and let people know what's going on with art. And this show looks like it's going to be tremendous.
This certainly is a unique opportunity for the students because you don't see much of this in rural Texas. And I think Jane was really we did have a graduate student about 10 years ago who was working with Encaustic, but Jane brought this idea to me about 3 years ago, almost, and of showcasing hot and cold wax after she had done so much study and actually presented her thesis exhibition with these 2 mediums. So I was thrilled that we were able to make this happen during our isolation. And
yeah, I think the invitation came to me about a year ago today. Ben and I were at NASA Goddard when I got the invitation. We were visiting NASA Goddard's Visitor Center, and it was just a delight the year was just starting off so beautifully, and I'm so glad to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it's certainly been a chore for everyone. So I'm pleased that our administration has allowed us to have this exhibition. This will be the only one we've had this year. Since a year ago. So I think that this, Elise, what you're presenting to our students will give them, just open up their eyes to possibilities. And we do have an etching press, so there's a possibility there. And I thank you for your time and sharing this with us. And we look forward to having your work in the exhibition.